Hi, it's Chris. In today's video, we're going to show you how to remove and install the wash motor in a GE dishwasher. Replacing the motor in your GE dishwasher is actually fairly easy. It just requires a few basic hand tools and just a little bit of time. Keep in mind, if your machine needs to be repaired, it's usually simple enough to do it yourself. Visit PartSelect.com, enter your model number, and quickly find and order the part you need. So some of the reasons you may have to replace the wash motor in your GE dishwasher is either a poor washability issue, or perhaps it's noisy. As well, maybe you have a little bit of a leak. Because it's pumping water, there's a water seal in there, and sometimes that seal fails and it starts to leak water on the floor. But in any situation, changing the motor is pretty easy. So to remove and replace the motor in your GE dishwasher, like most modern machines today, to do it, you're going to have to actually remove the dishwasher from the opening, which means you're going to have to turn off your power, turn off your water supply, and disconnect your drain. So it's pretty easy to do, but if you do need a little bit of guidance, you can always check out our other installation videos. So to do this removal installation, you don't necessarily need to remove the water line. I'm going to today just so that it's not in our way as I demonstrate how to remove that motor. So our next step is to remove the bottom panel from the base of the dishwasher. So I'm just going to remove any screws that hold it. And besides the screws, there's also some plastic fingers that lock this bottom panel onto the base. You're just going to have to give it some gentle pressure to release those. You see, these are the tabs that I just was talking about that you have to release. So now attached to that base is your leak sensor. And you can either leave it there and not have to worry about it when you take the motor out. You don't have to disconnect it. Or if you like to, you can simply just pull the wires off of it. So with the wires disconnected now, we can just move that bottom panel right out of our way. So here's our motor and pump assembly. It's kind of neat how they do this. There's no real brackets or mounts to this other than the two hoses where they connect to the pump assembly. And then it has a plastic tip that goes back through a grommet in the back. So they're quite easy to change. Now some of these motors will come with the capacitor already attached. Some without. So I'm just going to remove that capacitor just by putting my wrench and loosening that nut. And you can see there's just two wires that are on that capacitor, and they just pull off. Now with that removed, we're going to take our nut driver, in this case it's a 5/16, and we're just going to loosen the clamps. Now with those clamps loosened, it's really just a matter of pulling your motor forward, pulling these hoses off, and then now that you have the pump assembly in this direction, you're just going to pull it straight upwards. So that mount just basically pulls right out of that grommet. And sometimes when you pull them out, the grommet will come out while you're doing it. Don't worry about if it does. You're just going to slip it back into place. There. So hopefully yours stayed in place, but if it does pop out, don't worry about it. You just work it back into its proper location. So the next thing we need to do is to remove our ground wire and undo our connection where it connects to the wiring harness. So you're seeing more and more of them using this style of connector. And while it looks the same like a regular spade connector, it actually has a locking tab to it. So this is to help keep the connector from wiggling loose from normal operation and vibration. So to remove them, you can pull and they will come. But if you take your pliers and squeeze that little tab, it releases the lock and the terminal comes right off. This type of connector just pulls straight out. Now that you have everything disconnected, you can discard this motor and pump assembly and bring in your new one and install it. So to install our new pump and motor assembly, the first thing I'm going to do is hook up my electrical connections. So we've got two wires. These particular ones are marked as blue and white. They're completely interchangeable on this motor and pump assembly. It doesn't matter which one you get where, it'll still work just fine. So just push those connectors into place. Give them a little tug to make sure they're well secured, and they are. We've got a ground that we need to connect. So now that we have that connected, all we need to do now is take our mount and slide it through the opening of the grommet. Now I usually put my hand underneath just to support that grommet so I don't wind up pushing it out of its position. If it does come out, then you just put it back into place. Now that that's been inserted, I'm just going to rotate it. And I'm going to move this into place to connect to my hoses. I find it easiest to work on this connection first. Just because this hose is very short, it doesn't have a lot of play to it compared to this larger one, which I can manipulate as I need to. So I'm just going to bring my pump, introduce it to this hose, slide it into place. And you will notice that on this housing, there's a little bump. And on the hose, it's a little hard to see, but you can feel it. There's the same little notch in the hose. So the idea is you'll know you're perfectly lined up where you need to be when you have that notch go into that groove in the hose. And you can run your finger there and feel it. So once you know you have that lined up, you just bring your clamp into place and then tighten it up. So now we'll just reattach the larger hose. And again, the same thing. You'll see it has a little notch here and a little tab right there. So you just make sure you have that notch lined up with that little tab. Bring your clamp down into place and tighten it up. So there. So what do we have left? That's right. We want to put our capacitor back on. Now anytime you've got a capacitor you just picked up or taken off, they will typically have discharged on their own. But if they haven't or you're not sure, just take your screwdriver and put it against the two contacts like that. Doing that will discharge your capacitor. If it was fully charged and we did that, you might hear a little snap and you might see a little arc. But it's always a good idea to discharge your capacitor. That way you know if you do grab it, you're not going to get any kind of a jolt from it. So now we're just going to put our wires back on. Move it up into place. Put the nut back on. There we go. So now we just need to bring in our bottom panel. We'll hook up the two wires for our leak sensor. And again, they're the same size terminal, and it doesn't matter which one goes where. Push them on and you'll feel them slide on tight, and you'll actually feel and hear that little click of the latch grabbing hold, so you know you've made that good connection. So now we just bring up our bottom panel into place, line up our latch pins, take our securing screw, put it into place. So now that we have our bottom panel on, we're just going to hook up our water line again. Take our adjustable wrench and tighten that up. So now that we have our water connection secured on this end, the next thing we need to do is just stand up our dishwasher, slide it in towards the opening, and make our connections, our water line and drain underneath the counter, and hook up our electrical supply. Secure it to the countertop, and then the dishwasher is ready to go. And that's just how easy it is to install the motor and pump assembly in your GE dishwasher.